Ster Dumnoni. A History of the Dumnonii, Chapter 1. Claude Ptolemy was the first of his Theed to chart Prydain's shores, and he wrote of the Dumnonii, meaning the men from deep dales, situated to the west of the Dorotriges, themselves to the southwest of the Belgae, who dwelt at Aqua Calide, that is, Bathadum, and assigned them 4 towns, Foliba, Uchela, which is most likely Seaton, Tamara, most likely Plymouth, and Isca, wherein he placed the 2nd Legio, certainly Exeter. Geoffrey Monmouth later wrote that Vespasian Rome-Drighton had lain were-camp to Exeter, what was then called Carpen-Welgoet. This happened, if indeed it did happen, after hallowed Aristobulus had already declared the gospel unto the Britons, and before Ptolemy had charted the island. Some maintain that hallowed Joseph Arimathea reached the isle and was preaching there before Aristobulus, but we do not hold this true. The finding of Greek coin under Old Exeter makes us sure what Caesar said Gaul, that she had her Daphnetunas before the Roman coming. Exeter sitteth at the south end of Fossway, what runs thence through Dorotriges land, Belgae land, and Dubona land, crosses Watling Street at Fenona up to Rattay, what we call Leicester, and on to Lindum, from the so-called Sea of Britons nearly to that of Germans, and a ruder way was lain running eastward from Exeter to Donachester. Today's Edstokirk sitteth nearly upon Old Exterton, what had her a wall ring over 2 miles about, which mostly standeth today. She was by all accounts a rich burg, made all the trappings of Roman life till Magnus Hispane, Hertog Prydain, did take the greater deal of Prydaineferd to make war with Gratian, at what time, we read, Conan Meriadoc, whose name meaneth Hound of the Sea, was Dumnonikinning, whose son Gideon came after him for the space of 3 years, whose latter's son Guramor came after him for 10 years, whose son Theodwal came after him another 10 years, whose son Conmor came after him 25 years and begat Constantine, and about Conmer's time, or just before, did quit Roma from Prydain for evermore. History of the Dumnonii, Chapter 2. In the days of Conan Meriadoc and Magnus Hispane did come over the sea from the district of the Dumnoni to Linchester on the Alne, that is, Castellin or Châtelain, a certain atheling Romana who used his Christian name Solomon, along with his eldest son Aldroin, and entrusted his younger son Constantine to the care of Magnus's thanes in Dover, that he might grow to manhood there and be Hertog Prydain thereafter. Aldroin reigned after his father in Armorica in the days of Conmor Theodwalson, and he begat 2 sons, Uther and Budic. It is said that Guramor begat also a son Rewal, who also took his men over the sea to Armorica during the reign of Constantine Conmerson, that dragon whom hallowed Gildas writing later weareth to baron slaughter, and in whose time did Wertigern, Earl Dofer, call them Secna to Prydain to slaughter them Scoti and them Picti. Rewal reigned at Landreger on the north coast, and was father to a son and kinning of the same name, and also to hallowed Cupaya. About those same days also, about the end of Constantine's reign, Uther Atheling Aldrinson begat Arthur in Armorica, and about the same time that Arthur was begotten did Constantine Solomonson, Uther's uncle, beget Ambrose in Dover, for what cause did Uther send his son to be raised in Dover with Ambrose his kinsman. After Constantine Dragon had reigned 8 years, he died, and his good son, hallowed Erbin, came after him for a space of 37 years. Constantine also had another son, more baleful than himself, called Conmor, and baptized as Mark, who came to reign in Tamara, and a fair daughter baptized as Elisabeth. Now the Scoti and Picta were very strong in their slaughtering of the Britons. For what cause did Aldrin, kinning, come into Dover, and take rede with his brother Constantine that they should gather ferd and slaughter them? Wertigorn, Earl Dover, had called the Saxon into Prydain for to fight against Scoti and Picta, and brought the hate of many upon him. And the leading Earl of the Cantiaci came together and said, Lo, the atheling to whom we bend knee is bring waste unto all of us by the hand of these hired Saxna, the same as have went a weeking on our shores for 100 years or more. Come, let us drive him out, and put the weald of this land into Constantine Solomonson's hands. And Vortigern heard tell of their thinking, so he lured Constantine to a moot and slaughtered him. And Aldrin speedily went back over to Armorica with his grandson Arthur and his nephew Ambrose, as Vortigern's men were hunting them down for to slaughter. And word was that Uther Alduinson died in an uncanny hap at the same time as his son and his cousin were coming over from Dofr, and the boys were raised without their fathers, but only Ald Oldrin and the men of New Dumnonia, chief among them Meliod, a friend of Uther's, whose kin were knit to Sullivan Kinninga. It was about the 7th year of Urban's reign that Arthur and Ambrose left Prydain, the same year of the great din at Chalons. When they came to manhood, they both came back to Prydain. Ambrose went to Dofr to be hertug unto the whole of the isle, leading Ferd for the whole Witnagemut of Prydain. Arthur went into Dumnonia to serve as Urban's hertug, and Urban gave his sister unto Meliod, who bore him Tristan. Urban begat Geraint, Daiwul, and Ermed. At this time did Edoacer drive out from Italy them Romana Athelinga, and Ambrose's Ferd was driven out of Dofr and kept on fighting many battles against Sexna. Aldroin died in this time, and his son Budic took his kingship and begat Meleau. And Rewal Theodwalson died, and a certain Conan took his kingship. The land in which Budic rigsard is called Cornwall, and the same name is given to Prydain to the folk and land lying west of the four Dumnonis tunas named by Ptolemy. For the folk on both sides of the Briton Sea are so called since they live upon like horns of land stoking westward into the sea. And in fact, the men on both sides thereof are of like kinship, that they might together be called Cornwalla, yet they are not of different kin from the Dumnoni, but that their earliest kinninga, as we have now set forth, were of Romana Theod. Now the Secno were waxing strong and taking much of Prydain, and Arthur is said to have fought them at 12 Badwu, on the Glane, 4 times on the Douglas, on the Bassus, at Celadonwudu, at Quinnenburg, at Legienburg, which J.E. Giles says is Exeter, on the Tribroot, on Bregwindun, and at Bath. He held hall at Exeter with Hallod Erben and was foster father to Geraint, who married Enid, the daughter of the Earl of Seaton, whose crying out when boxed upon the ear by a certain earl saved her husband from the point of death and revived him after he had done battle with 3 giants. And Geraint slaughtered that earl, this in the 37th year of his father's reign, whereupon he unfanged kingship Dumnonia. Should then we hold true what Giles saith, that the 9th of Arthur's Bedwu was at Exeter, it must have been in the 30th year of Urban's reign, in which year the Saxons' annals bear out that they drove the Britons all their far to the west. It should follow that the tale of Geraint and the giants happened some time between that Bedwu and the great 12th battle upon the down of Bathampton, where it is said that Arthur bore his cross 3 days and 3 nights, and did slaughter 70 Sexna, who had, faring far beyond Theragan land into Dorotriga, made camp upon the high dune, and were very hard in keeping it. History of the Dumnonii, Chapter 3. After this time, the Sexna were long time at bay and kept their own reacher, to the east of the Arona and the Chilterns, where they had driven away Vortigern and his Cantiaci, along with the Trinofantes, the Cataphilauni, and the Regans. Of Ambrose we know were begotten many Athelinga Prydain, but their names and their burkas are unknown to us. And Geraint reigned after his father 34 years and begat Cato, while Budic Urthurson, whose sons were all 4 of them hallowed, Ishmael Bishop Rosa, Yodigar Bishop Landafa, Tufi Christis Martyr, and Great Hewel, who took wife hallowed Cupaya Rebel's daughter, about the same time took the kingship in Linchester Alna for the space of 50 years, but was withsaken by his cousin Melial Budixon, and spent a long time in David, in which time his son Tufi was slaughtered and gathered to the Lord. In David, hallowed Cupaya Rebel's daughter bore Theodoric and the 3 hallows Sheaf, Theodowal, and Leonera, along with a daughter Isolde. When the boys were full grown, Rewal, the brother of Cupaya, came to reach at Landregger, and by his help did return Budic Kinning to Armorica along with his sons and grandsons, leaving Isolde to be raised by Forteber Dafydd Kinning. Having taken the kingship, Budic sent Tristan Meliodson on an errand over sea to deliver Isolde unto old Conmar, Kinning in Tamara, now a blue-bearded old man with 6 wife in the grave and no sons to live after him. But Tristan took Isolde for himself instead, for that she loved him in heart and in soul. Because of this was Conmar greatly angered with Budic and his kin. Now, someone writing this are wont to say that Conmar Mark was a younger man in these days, and not the wizened eld in his 4th score of years that we write him to be. They write him thusly for to say that Isolde should have loved Conmar, her Grecoran man, the same as she loved Tristan, her taker, and they also write that she did in fact become Conmar's wife and forbeter. We could suppose this to be true if Conmar Mark begat Conmar Mark, the younger. All the same, we know that Tristan and Isolde were wed in the flesh not for the sake of Isolde's father and grandfather in their reedcraft, but for the sake of love herself, which she had for Tristan and not for Conmar. and we know that Conmar Constantin was a cruel and baleful man who might yet have been king, an unblithe elder whom no son lived to come after. So, Conmar raised Ferd for slaughter Solomon's kin, and to take Isolde or another dame, this in the 35th year of the reign of Budig Urtherson, and the 33rd of hallowed Geraint, shortly after the death of Hludwig Frankekinning. The Stoke where he made battle with Geraint and with Arthur and with Tristan is called by the Britons Hlongborth, and there Geraint fell from his swift horse down upon Feld, never for to rise again, and there old Conmar Bluebeard shot Tristan through with Geflock, which we think would not have been wound enough to fell with Tristan, but that Bluebeard had mingled adder upon that weapon. And there Arthur cleft Bluebeard in twain from the nave into the chest, and slaughtered him. Some folk say that Arthur also fell dead upon that field, while others say that no man nor illness was strong enough to fell Uther's son, till his own son, Merdred, stood against him, and they both fell down at Camlan. No sons of Tristan are known. History of the Dumnonii, Chapter 4. Hallowed Cupaya fell asleep in the Lord on the day after the 544th anniversary of his circumcision, and she was said to be 100 years old. Budig Utherson likewise died old and full of years some time afterward, and nearly the same time did die his son hallowed Hewel. So Theodric Hewelson followed afterward to kingship, and reigned not in Armorica, but in Cairnsue, in the far west of island Dumnonia, for he was driven out by them Feneta under Macleo, after reigning 27 years there, in which time he slaughtered many Prista and Munca who had come to Prydain from the Isle of Ire. He came back overseas to slaughter Macleo and his son Yeko, and he made frith with Macleo's other son Werach, and sometimes helped him against Dumfranca. Werach became king in Lenchester when Theodric died without a son, and gave Gield to Gontram or Linuskinning. Cato Geraintson came after his father in kingship, since Duel his uncle, and most likely Ermid also, had been slaughtered in war, and he held it 16 years, begetting hallowed Constantine. He built 4 strong burghs, in Clefadon, Congressfield, Sparkford, and on the Ersk by Crediton. This Constantine came after his father in the kingship for the space of 30 years, and begat Geraint and Bledric, and he retired to a monk house. During his reign, Justinian Rumdryden laid waste to Italy, and drove them Gotha out therefrom, and Alboin led his Longobarda into Italy. Rewal the Younger reigned 7 years at Landreger, and begat Dioric, who came after his father for a space of 10 years, and begat Jonas. Deric took in his kinsman, the hallowed Theodwal, and his 72 pupils, and Hildbert Praerse, Kinning, made Theodwal Bishop Treguer. Theodwal fell asleep in the Lord on the 1st day of December in his year the 564th, which was 4 years and 5 months alsuch after the hallowed brother Leonra had done likewise. History of the Dumnonii, Chapter 5. Jonas Derrickson slaughtered his rival Rathan 5 years after the death of Derrick, and reigned 5 years, begetting hallowed Udin. A certain follower of Conmar Bluebeard withstood against Jonason, and was called Conmar Kinning. He drove Juda out for a space of 14 years. Then Jude came back and slaughtered him, and reigned 26 years, and begat Udhael. Udhael reigned after his father 25 years, and begat hallowed Udicael, hallowed Uduk, hallowed Winnock, and Hallock, along with 11 more sons. Geraint Constantinson reigned 38 years in Exeter without issue. In his time, the Sexna again gathered Ferd and made war and slaughter upon the Britons, and they won burghs as far as Glerwin and Batham. The Bedrufield of Bathampton never again was in Britain's reek till the rise of Heinrich Theodor 900 years afterward. When Geraint died and was gathered to his ancestors, his brother Bledric came after him in the kingship for a space of 15 years, and begat Clemens and Blethin. Bledric Kinning was Hertog Great Ferd of Breda during Othelfrith's war. For that Kinning, an Angle from the Northland, came down and slaughtered Silif Powisikinning at Legrachester, and then slaughtered 1200 of monks at Bangor. So came up a gathered Ferd of all them Breda, and gave bedwith there at Bangor. Bledric fought Othelfrith in Anwig, and wounded him, but Bledric was himself slaughtered. In the days of Bledric, Udhael Udison died, and his son Udicael came after him for a space of 5 years, after which time his 14 brothers rose up together and put Hallock on the throne for a space of 5 years, during which Udicael lived as a monk at Gael. Hallock died, and Udicael returned to the kingship for a space of 27 years, after which time he went back to the monk house and made his brother Uduk king in his stead. Udicael lived 10 years after this, and fell asleep in the Lord on the 16th day of December in his year the 652th. Uduk himself had gone pilgrim 16 years before this, went on to Rome and was made priest, and was 9 years a hermit in the northern deal of Sigbert Dagbritson's lands, hundreds of miles eastward of Armorica. Nevertheless, he was rightly called Dumnoni Kinning for a space of 16 years. When he fell asleep in the Lord on the 22nd day of January, in his year the 668th, his relics were found incorrupt, so that his pupils have continued to shear the hair from his skull to this day. Clemens came after his father in the kingship for a score of years and begat Padraig. In his first year of reign came the Sexna to Beamdon near Seaton, and gave Bedwul. And in the last year of his reign he did gather Ferd mid Cadwalla Gwynetha and mid Penda the Angle to fight against Edwin Alice and Armorican, and he died on the Wereweg. Padraig Clemenson was mid his father at the time an unfanged kinship, which he held 22 years. He held his kin to the din of Hatfeld, where they slaughtered Edwin and his son Osferth, never for to rise again. And the next year they gave again battle at Heavenfield, where Oswald slaughtered Cadwalla and became Predenikinning. Clemens begat Coleman and Progmail, and he was slaughtered by Kenwell Saxna at Bradford. Coleman came after his father for a space of 2 years, and begat Dongarth. Dongarth came after his father for a space of 39 years, in which time the Saxna drove their reach as far west as Exeter.